Going to get a little bit more challenging. Good morning. We're learning as the schutz for Shlema Filan Chaya Baserach and for as an aliyah for the neshama Meir Ben Elazar. We are on Daf Samches Amin Beis. Um, we're just about halfway down. Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan. What was that? It was a start. Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Ula said, "B'shem Rabbi Yochanan, ve'ever atzmei mutter." He disagrees. We had brought from the beginning of the sukkah, right? The Mishnah had said that when the animal sticks out its hand, or the fetus sticks out its limb, and then it retracts it, it's mutter b'achila. It wasn't clear what the mutter b'achila was referring to. We saw Rabbi Yehuda Marav, who said it's referring to the uber, the actual fetus that remained inside. But the aver that went outside, since it was Yotze Chutzl Mechitzasai, it says Babahema, it says Sada B'Sei, what's it called? Sada B'Sei Treifa, Ubasa B'Sei Treifa. That tells you that anything that went out of its mechitzas is aser. He says so. According to Yehuda Marav, once this limb went outside of the uber imay, it becomes like a treifa and it's aser. Ula b'shem Rabbi Yochanan says Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. He says that that limb that went outside is still mutter. Doesn't become aser because it went outside. He argues with the basic premise of Yehuda Marav. He disagrees with that limit. The Eva atzmei mutter. He says the Eva itself that went outside, it's also mutter. As long as it went back in, which obviously makes the lashon of the Mishnah much better. Vechziroi. Right, that was the big problem. Why was making it ziroi? So if it's outside when you shecht it, it's not going to become mutter with the shchita. But if it's a ziroi, then the aver itself will become mutter. Amalei Yehuda Ula, Barav Shmuel Dami Travayu Aver Atzmai Aser. We had seen Rav Yehuda Marav and Shmuel agrees with him that the aver itself is aser. The aver that went out before the shchita is aser. If halavai that we should have some of the dust of Rav and Shmuel and put it in our eyes, it would help us see better. So it's saying I'm not looking to detract at all from the cover of Rav and Shmuel. However, this is what Rabbi Yochanan said: "Hakol hayu b'chlal basa b'snei treifa." Really, the pasuk of basa b'snei treifa tells you that anything that's yotze chutzl mechitzasai is going to be asa. Basa b'snei treifa loy techel. You shouldn't eat it. K'shepalcha akasav gabi chatos sheyotze chutzl mitzasai v'chazer asur. But however, since the Torah, after it said sada b'snei treifa, it also says specifically about a carbon chatas, that if it goes outside of the area where it's allowed to be in, meaning it has to be shechted in the azara. If it goes outside of the azara, it's kachim, it's not allowed to be eaten, or shechted outside of the azara, it's going to be aser, and basar kachim that was yoytzel chutz remains aser forever. But it tells you chatas would depart rachman I will call me even the harder shard. However, since the Torah tells you by chatas that when it went outside and then came back in, it's aser, it's telling you only that is going to have the din that since it went outside of its mechitzas, outside of its allowable bounds, it's going to be aser. But something else like the limb of a uber that went outside of its mother's womb, that will not remain aser. If it goes back in, it will become mutter again. That is the shita of Rabbi Yochanan. Meisvei, fragt the Gemara on Rabbi Yochanan. Basa b'sei trefa lo yisei chelu, ma talmud laim. What is that pasuk telling you? Lefisha matzina b'maiser sheni ubikurim. We find by maiser sheni bikurim, right? The maiser sheni is you have to take a tenth of your food and bring it to Yerushalayim, and bikurim also has to be brought to Yerushalayim. Sh'ava b'shi yatzu chutzum chitzasan v'chazum b'tarim. The pasuk tells you about them specifically. We'll see the source for that in a minute. that their din is the other way around. The Torah tells you that even if both of them are supposed to be brought to Yerushalayim, if you brought them to Yerushalayim and then took them back out of Yerushalayim afterwards, that doesn't pass. Yachal av zekin. I would have thought that the chatas is the same way. Tamalayim et treifa. That's why the Torah says treifa, to tell you once it goes, not by chatas. I would think everything is like that. In Uber and chatas, tamalayim et treifa. That's what the Torah says. Sada b'stei treifa. We say something goes out of mechitzas, it has a din of a treifa. My Talmud. What's the limud? Marava ketreifa. Ma treifa gives you nitra shuvein laheter. Av basar gives you chutz mechzasa shuvein laheter. We learn from Rabbi Yochanan wanted to say, since the Torah tells you chatas, that when it goes back into the place where it went out and it came back in, it remains aser, so that would tell you everything else is going to be mutter when it goes back. But he says no. It says we have this brisa that tells you the limud, that I would have thought just like Meiser and Bikurim, even if it goes out of the area where it's allowed to be in, if it's brought in afterwards, it's going to become mutter. Maybe this din of Sada b'sei treifa should also have that same din. So he learns out from the word treifa. Treifa is something, once it becomes treifa, it can never be fixed. It can never be brought back to its original standing. So the Torah tells you that also the limb of an Uber that went out can never go back to its original state and it remains awesome.
Does it remain also forever, or if you shock that kid, it's going to be kosher?
No, it's not going to. The kid's not going to be. Well, we're talking over here.
The Uber is kosher, not the limb.
We're talking over here without shechting the animal, right? Without shechting the Uber. You're shechting the mother. And then the Uber is getting mutter together with the mother. But as we're going to see, you cannot shecht the Uber. The Uber has no din of shchita. Once it gets a shchita from the mother, that precludes doing the shchita afterwards. And we're going to talk about what the status is of that. We'll see what it's going to be complicated. What happens with that aver? But what you're suggesting that after the animal is born, let's say you shech the mother and then the animal is born, let's shech the animal and that should be mater, that leg. That animal, that Uber has lost its opportunity for shechita. Once the mother is shechted, once an animal has been shechted, it has a din that it was nishchat, it can no longer have another shechita. And since this has a din that it was already shechted by the mother, it's not capable of having a shechita anymore. So that's why this limb is in purgatory. It was the shechita of the mother did not apply to it because it was yaitzel from the chitzasai, but it's not capable of having its own shechita, and that's why it remains aser forever. Yeah. So Gemara, tiyufta deula tiyufta. So since we see clearly that the pasuk of Basa b'stei treifa is coming to take us away from Ma'aser Sheni and Bikurim, that they can come back into their bounds, it's telling you that the limb cannot go back into its bounds, it can never become mud. Amama. Now we go back to the statement that we said, Lefisha Matzina with Ma'aser Sheni Bikurim, that we find by them that if they go out of their bounds, in the case of Ma'aser Sheni Bikurim, that's Yerushalayim, and then they return, that they're mutter. Heichen Matzina, where do we see that? And for the Gemara, you're not allowed to eat the Ma'aser Sheni and the Bikurim within your boundaries, meaning where you originally came from. You have to bring it to Yerushalayim. So you can't eat it before you brought it to Yerushalayim. But if it went out and then came back in, it's mutter. Okay, so that is, again, the shita of Rabbi Yochanan, right? That Rabbi Yochanan says, we had a machlokes Rav and Shmuel versus Rabbi Yochanan. Rav and Shmuel, we saw Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, that he says that when an aver goes out and you shech the mother, and then it goes back in, you shech the mother, that aver remains aser, and Rabbi Yochanan says it's mutter. Marava Masni Hachi. In the West, in Eretz Yisrael, they had a different version of this machlekes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Amar Yesh Yedelevar. Rather than saying that it's a limud from Ubasa B'Stei Treva that tells you once it was Yotzel from the Mechitza, the Aver was Yotzel from the Mechitza, that makes it that it remains also forever. He says that he states it differently. He says that when the Aver goes out, it's as if it's already born. So that's why you can no longer have a shchita. The shchita of the mother doesn't apply because it was already born, and once something is born, it cannot be unborn. So even if it goes back into the mechitza, that's not going to help it. So it's the same shita as Yehuda Marav, but stated differently. And we'll see what the nafkamin is, how you state it. He says there's no birth to the Evarim, so when it goes back in, it can become mutter with the shchita of the mother. My beinayu. There's very, very different shitas in the Rishonim about how to understand this Gemara, but we're going to go with Rashi shita. Rashi shita is, what's the difference between the two ways of explaining the machlokes Rabbi Yehuda Marav and Rabbi Yochanan? The difference between the original version of Rabbi Yehuda Marav and the version of Rabbi Yehuda Marav that he's saying that there's a leda for the Evarim is, let's say the animal stuck out its foreleg and it stuck it out, let's call it whatever it calls the knee, the midpoint of that leg, or 3/4 of that leg, and 1/4 is still inside of the Me'imai. So according to the first version, when after you shech the animal, you just cut off the 3/4 that was outside, and that becomes aser, and the 1/4 that of the leg of the aver that was still inside becomes mutter with the shchita. But according to the version that we said yesh leidel evarim, the entire aver is treated as if it was born, and even that quarter that remained inside was also treated as born, and therefore, when you shech the mother, the entire aver is going to become us. That's the difference. Ibaylu. The Divrei Omer ein leida levar. According to the man the Amar, meaning according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says there's no leida for evarim, that the whole aver is mutter. What happens if the animal, the fetus, stuck out one foreleg and then brought it back in? And then it stuck out the other foreleg and returned it. And then he continued doing that. He stuck out the hind leg and the other hind leg, and he kept on sticking out different pieces until roiv of the animal had actually come out. And we know the din is, according to everyone, right? Our question is with just one leg stuck out. But if roiv of the animal, even if it doesn't include the head, we saw that if the head comes out, that's a leda. But also if it's like from the back part of the animal, if roiv of the animal comes out, it's considered a leda. So what happens if it came out to be a roiv of the animal, but piece by piece, it wasn't all in one shot? But do we say, since roiv of the animal came out, even though we say ein leid levarim, but you have a leid of the entire fetus? Ideal nilma, kivin the hadar. Or do you say no? When a piece came out, one aver came out, then it came in, and we said there's no leid levarim, so now everything's back to the way it was. So you didn't have the whole roiv come out at one time. So come on, intim salam kivin the hadar. If you'll tell me, no, each piece came out separately, so you can't add them up to make a roiv of the animal to make it a leda. What happens? Heiser over as yadai v'chatcha. If the animal stuck out different limbs, and each one, as it was stuck out, it was cut off. So clearly that part is not coming out. V'chazav heiser as yadai. Then it v'chatcha. And then it stick out another limb. Acha shlima l'rubai. And you cut off roiv of them separately. You can't say in that case it was hadar. It was not hadar. So do you add up all the different limbs that came out and say in summer, in some you had roiv of the animal, so it's considered as if roiv of the animal was already yaitza, and therefore it's not going to become mutter with the shchita of the mother. Or maybe no, it's not. Even though you in some you had all a roiv of the animal, you need a roiv of the animal to be born at the same time. And now you look at it, each piece got taken off. At that time, roiv was still in. Right? When you cut off the first leg, roiv of the animal is still in, but then what's left is smaller. So each piece that you took off roiv was still left inside. Sekmar Toshma. Let's bring a raya from our Mishnah. Zaklal davar shegufa aser, v'she'ena gufa mutter. So we said in our Mishnah, right? At the end of the Mishnah, we said if you cut off a piece of the uber and it remained inside of the mother, and then you shech the animal, it's mutter b'achila. And if you cut off a piece of the spleen or of the liver or the kidneys of the animal while it's inside, it's going to be aser. And the Mishnah said, Zeh klal, davar shegufa aser, something that's part of the animal that you cut off, it's going to become aser. So obviously the tchol and the kloyos, the spleen and the kidney are part of the animals. So when you cut it off and leave it inside the animal, it doesn't become mutter with the shchita. We're going to see this from a pasuk. But something that's not part of the animal, like for example, an uber, a fetus, when it becomes mutter with the shchita of the mother, which it's maybe you would think it's exactly the other way around, right? It should be theoretically something that's part of the animal. The shchita is matter, but the Gemara says no. We learn that from a pasuk. But now the Gemara says, "V'she'en gufa mutter, she'en gufa lasuya mai." What's the chid of she'en gufa? We already said in the beginning of the Mishnah that an uber becomes mutter with the shchita of the mother. As long as it wasn't yotzel from michatzasai, the uber becomes mutter. So what does it make, whether it's part of the uber, or if it's cut off inside of the mother from the uber? Is it not coming to tell us this exact din, where you cut off a piece that went outside and it was all mashlim to a rod? So that's not what the Mishnah's intention was. It's coming to tell you an entirely different thing, which we have discussed before. Lasuya kolot b'mei para, where you had an animal that did not have split hooves. It had some kind of deformity. The calf, let's say inside of a cow, that doesn't have split hooves. So if it was born, we say it will be aser, according to Rav Shimon, as we're going to see in a second. If a para gives birth to an animal that's missing split hooves, it's aser. That's only if it's born. If it's still in its mother's womb, if it's a fetus and you shech the mother, so it gets the din, like we always say that when you shech the mother, what's inside of its mother, even though this is missing the siman of kashrus, it's not a full-fledged animal that needs to have the siman of kashrus. It becomes mutter because of the mother. So together with the heter of the shchita, it also has the heter of the mother's simanim. So that's the chiddush of what our Mishnah says. Davar that's not migufa is going to be mutter. It's going to tell you even this day. Boyer of Chananya. Chananya asked the following question: Hoitzi uberis yadai ba'azara mahu. What happened if you had a mother, a female animal that was mekudesh as a carbon, and the uber is also mekudesh together with the mother? That uber stuck out its hands while it's in the azara, which is the makom shchita of kachrim. Do we say miga dehava mechitza legabe kachrim, haminami legabe dehai? Right? We said that this din of basa b'stei treifa comes to tell you that anything that's yotza from mechitzasa is awesome. It has a wide application. We were talking over here about the animal, the fetus that stuck out its leg, that was yotze from the mechitza of the uber imay. But there's also an application, legabi kachim, that an animal that goes outside of the mechitza, meaning from the mechitza of the Beis Hamikdash, becomes aser as a chutzlum kaimai, and if it goes back in, it's also going to be aser. So do we say, since this animal, in one sense, still is within its mechitza, that it's still within the mechitza of the Beis Hamikdash, which is restricted, it can only be shachat inside the mechitza of the Beis Hamikdash. So we'll ignore the yitzias from the mechitza of the Ober Imai. It doesn't, since it's considered to some sense within its mechitza, it can't become in a different sense out of its mechitza. Yeah, it's a very interesting svara that you wouldn't have thought on your own. Oy Dilma, or else you would say the more straightforward way, seemingly, the gabi the high la mechitzi, the mechitza over imehi. What do you say? There's two separate mechitzas. One does not impact the other. Just because it's still within its mechitza as far as kachim, it went out of its mechitza as far as an uber, and it'll have the regular din that the limb will be us. Amle Abaya. Abaya said back then, kachim kalam b'Yishalayim. Why are you just discussing that it's within its mechitza, legabe shchita? If you have kachim kalam, those are not restricted just to the Beis Hamikdash; they're restricted to Holy Yerushalayim. That you can take it outside of the Beis Hamikdash, Yerushalayim. Kachim kalam Yerushalayim, my time aloi kamibaya. Loch. Why don't we ask the same question? If a uber stuck out its leg within Yerushalayim, if it was kachim kalam, that's the restriction of where you could eat it. The mechitza over imahu. The reason why you didn't ask that is because you understand that the mechitza of the uber is the womb of the mother, and if it went out of that mechitza, it's going to be also to eat. So hachanami mechitza over imahu. Just like you don't want to ask it legabi kachim kalam, legachilas kachim kalam, it's equally not a question legabi the shchita of all kachim that has to be in the azara. That's the two things don't mix. The two things, one doesn't impact the other. It could be within its mechitza legabi kachim, but it's outside of its mechitza legabi the ummah. Boy Ilfa. Ilfa asks another question, not directly related to this. Hoitzi uber is yodai bein similar sin. You're shechting the mother, and in the middle there two. As we know, by an animal, you have to shech both simanim in order for it to be a kosher shchita. And between the shchita of the esophagus and the shchita of the trachea, between the kana and the veshet, the animal stuck out its leg. So it was inside for the first siman, but outside for the second. Ma, mi mitzar siman rishon l'siman sheni l'tara midei devel. Obviously, you didn't have a full kosher shchita on that leg, so it's not going to be kosher for eating. But do we put the two simanim together and say, at least it's going to make it that it's not going to be a treifa? We had said before, if the leg was outside during the shchita, or if it was outside and it came back in, we would agree there was a machlokes, but one malama said it will help that it's no longer going to be an avail. We're not saying it's a limb that didn't get any shchita at all. It just won't help to be matered b'achila, but it will be matered to be that it's no longer an avail, but it will be treated like a treifa. But this limb, part of it got a full regular shchita, and part of it only got the shchita to make it that it's no longer an avail. Can you put together the two shchitas, the first siman and the second siman, that they had different statuses? I like. Do you starve them or not? Amar Rava says kal v'chaymer. He says it would seem like the what you naturally would think. Im hoyel siman rishon l'siman sheni la'atira ba'achila. Generally, any animal that you shecht, for sure, whether it's with an uber or without an uber, you have two separate simanim, and we say the two simanim can go together even though they're done separately. They're not done at the same time. We mitzvah them to be mata the behemoth b'achila with a shchita, of the two simonim becomes mutter to eat. Why shouldn't we put them together if it can be materit la'achila and to take it away from nevela? Why shouldn't that be mitzdarf with the second simon, which is only being materit for nevela? So what should the Gemara? It's a little hard to understand what the two tzaddim of this are. If you're saying that the two things are looked at as separate, as different, because one is being matter from achil and the other one's matter nevela, what's the kal v'chaimer from the fact that every animal can just be achila, but they're not? They're both simonim are doing the same thing. It's a little hard to understand what the two tzaddim are. But we're not, much as I'm tempted, we're not going to go look through Rashi because I didn't see Rashi really explain it better than that. So usually I like to look at the Rashis that explain something that I don't fully understand, but we're going to have to just skip it today. Boy Rav Yirmiyah, Ma'u lachash lazare. Now it gets interesting. What's the din about the descendants of this ben pakua? Right? We say if an animal if a fetus is inside of an animal during the shechita, that fetus no longer needs a shechita. And it could be born, and it still won't need a shechita. Now, we've said that there's a takanas chachamim that you can't eat it because we don't want it to come out of michshol. The people will see that you could just hit a full-grown cow over the head with a hammer and then eat it because it's a ben pakul, because you know that originally it was shechted while the mother was shechted while it's inside. But the ikar hadin is that it's mutter to eat. Now, what happened if you had that fetus had a leg that stuck out? So that part of the animal is going to be asa forever. The rest of the animal you could eat, but that leg, you wait 5 years for it to grow into a full-grown steer. You make a bunch of steaks out of it, but the leg will remain asa because it was stuck out before the shechita. What happens if that ben pakua grew up to be a bull and in itself had its own children? It impregnated a cow, and then that cow had a calf. Ma'ulachash lazara. What's the din? Do we have to worry about the leg of that newborn calf because its father had a leg that had stuck out before the shechita of its mother, and that leg remained usher forever. So now this bull, 5 years later, is still running around in the pasture with one leg that can't be eaten. Now, when it gives birth, does it pass over? Does it pass on its halachic flaw to its child?
Now, this bull, 5 years later,
Yeah,
Midaraisa does not need a shechita, right?
right. But it's also midaraisa you can't eat its leg if you kill
Right.
it.
And the children need a shechita?
Yeah,
Yes,
they
so
didn't have
then what's
shechita.
I'm not seeing the what am I missing here? I don't see the comparison. The children need a shechita, so like the whole it's very definition, its rules are different. What do we?
But that because there's a part of that animal of the father that's incapable of shechita. So we're asking, does it usually when an animal gives birth to another animal, it always gets its own din of shechita.
Yeah, here like
But
they're not even
but over here
comparable.
it had something of it's unusual because it had something that wasn't capable of shechita. It's not just that it wasn't that the parent wasn't shachet, because that's every case. The parent didn't have a shechita yet. But over here, it's something that wasn't capable of shechita. Maybe that passes on to its offspring. You have a hard time with this.
Yeah, the other ones, other things I've gotten past. This one, I don't even see the comparison.
Let's see the Rashi.
Yeah.
Ma'u lochash lazari shel uber zeh shehoitzi yadai. Right. This is
Mm-hmm.
the uber that originally had stuck out its leg. V'nishchat imay. Its mother got a shechita. V'itziu chai. The ben pakua went out of its mother while it's alive, If it was dead, it wouldn't be relevant. The gadol ubal behema. It was born and v'hoiled maush yasa eva ki yoytze behanayla mimen. Rashi doesn't really, I guess, say a lot of explanation. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what more I could help.
Yeah, no,
I
no.
hear your objection. You're saying generally an animal that's born has its own din. It doesn't. Its ability to be nishchat
It's more
is
than that.
not
We're
affected.
literally splitting the baby here, but going to the father. Meaning, like, we're saying that the animal itself, the bull, doesn't need a shechita,
Right.
right? Yet you see the child does need a shechita. So we're saying no. As far
That's
as the
always the
shechita,
case.
I
Right.
know.
If
So
you've
then,
shechted them,
right, but I'm saying, so now you're like, right, the rules of shechita are different, but the isser should be, like, this sounds like a real litvak. Like,
well,
we're just looking for, like, isurim.
maybe a way to look at it is that limb. It may look at it as if it's a giraffe's, not a giraffe's. Let's say a lion's limb, just like
Yeah,
a chazir's limb.
yeah.
That means it's also to eat. You can't shecht it; it can never be eaten. So we look at it as if it's a treifa animal. If that's a little easier to think of it in that
Yeah.
way.
All
So
right.
partially was given birth from an animal that's not able to be eaten. Saktumar, hechidami. What's the case? Ilema de azal abehema mal yasa. If we're talking about that, this Ben Pakua, the father, we're talking about where the baby, the Uber was a male, and it was bought on a full-fledged female that had no problems of its own. Maria Haide is Yaitza. What is the problem? Because it had the limb that stuck out. I feel Ben Pakua da Amanami. Even just a regular animal that that is bought just a regular ben pakor that's bought on a on a regular animal, it's also going to be problematic. The Amr of Shashil, Divir Omer Choyshin Lazera. There's a machlekes about whether we care about the um the genetic its yichus of an animal from its father. We're talking about over there. It's talking about legabi the din that leishishchatu you can't shecht an animal and its parent on the same day. So machlekes that only apply. We know that applies for the mother. You can't shecht the mother together with its child on the same day. The question is, does it also apply to the father? So there's one Damanda Amar who says we do have to be chayshish and not shecht the father of the animal on the same day as the vlad. So according to that man, ben baku al bal behema am al yisa, havlad ein le takana. That vlad can never be fixed. The Misharshia says, even forgetting about whether there was a aver that's yaitza. Sorry. Um, well, it's still going to be awesome. Since it's the father has no din shchita, and the mother does have a din shchita, so you have this behema that's born that partially has a din requiring shchita, and it's partially a parent that doesn't need shchita. So, and like we said before, once something doesn't need shchita, shchita is not effective on it. So the shchita of this child will be awesome. So what are we talking about? Splitting the animal into parts that are need shchita and not if it was born on another animal that needs shchita, that itself is going to answer the vlad. So we're talking about two ben bakurs. The question is that the father had this leg that was yaitza. The mother is a full-fledged ben bakur, which also doesn't need shchita. My aver moilid aver v'chatach leveshari. Do we say that now this is, I think, going to really get you nervous, Lizzie, that flaw of the aver passes on to the vlad, and all you have to do, you could shech that vlad, but all you have to do is cut off its legs because it tracks the flaw of the father tracks to the child. Or do you say that no, which is what we would think, that the father is a combination of parts of it that are usher and parts of it are mutter, and therefore that's what passes on. Um, that's what passes on to its child, and therefore the whole thing is going to be usher because part of it you can't separate the part that's usher from the father that's mixed in amongst the child. Obviously, it gets mixed in and it asks the whole thing. If you think that the floor of the parent tracks the child, every blind cow should give birth to a blind calf, or an animal that's missing a limb, its child should miss it. But we obviously see that that's not true. They are mevalvazari v'hachi. So what is the question? Behema ba'alma. Every animal that shechts, that gives birth, and part of the mother is also to eat. The chalev of the mother and the dam of the mother is also to eat. So maybe that should go into its vlad and say that's mevovel by the vlad, and therefore you should be able to eat because every part of it could have some of the chalev and the dam of the mother in it. But that's obviously not the case. A calf you could shecht, v'shayit. Hachanami lo yishna. So we should say the same thing about this leg of the animal. We say the chalev and the dam; those don't mix into the calf. But once you mix in the third thing of the leg of the mother, that's usher because it was yaitza, that will mix in and that will not be able to, you won't be able to eat the calf. Okay, we're going to have to stop over here. Let's continue tomorrow with this fascinating topic. At least fascinating to me.